Okay, so here are the questions for section 5 of the India notes. So please pause the screen and record those questions in your notebook. All right, at this time, you should have those questions written down. And we are going to look at what's currently happening in India during these modern times. So let's start by looking at the political situation that's occurring within India at this time. So the first thing that we want to write is after gaining their independence, in the 1950s, India was ruled by a socialist government, and poverty swept the country. So initially, after gaining their independence, in that time of transition, they were a socialist country where basically everybody was going to be delegated with what jobs they would have and get the same and things like that. But it didn't work out in their system. It really wasn't the right system for their society, especially because they still kind of had the caste system in place to a certain degree. So they were in conflict with each other, the idea of separating people, but then everyone gets the same. So it just didn't work out. But fast forward to the 1990s, and this is the second bullet. In the 1990s, India became a democracy. In the 1990s, India became a democracy and began trading more freely with the world and expanding their industries. So for them, democracy was a better fit, and they started to kind of evolve their ideas. For example, getting rid of the caste system and giving people all, equal rights as citizens and things like that. So that started to kind of make them a more modern society and start to kind of help them economically to a certain degree. And then the last bullet, which is focusing on that idea, is that India has done away with its formal caste system. However, quota systems, QUOTA, are used that still create distinctions between classes in most of India. So even today, the caste system, while it's gone, there still is kind of that remnants of that society, and they can't really get away from it. And they've established this quota system, which some of you are reading about in your articles. So they still, are separating people, but they're trying to be somewhat less kind of obvious about it, which that takes us to currently their economic system. So for the second question, the first bullet is you're going to say the majority of India's population is still very poor. 60% of the population live on less live on less than $2 a day. 60% of the population live on less than $2 a day. So it's staggering to, believe that a good chunk of their population, over half, are living in, very great poverty in their nation. And many of those are in, the main parts of the cities, like Chennai and Bombay and places like that. It's a huge problem in their society. And we're going to look at that a little bit more in class. I'll show you some video clips in our movie that we're going to watch that really help illustrate kind of what it's like for many of the poor there. And that's really because of that Untouchables cast that was created so long ago that still kind of exists. So it's definitely an issue there. However, there are a group of the middle class that's kind of growing and building at the same time, and also this expanding, wealthy population. So the second bullet is that many are moving to cities, which are economically booming, moving to cities, which are economically booming, with jobs in the technology industry, or outsourced jobs from America, semicolon. As a result, the middle class is expanding. So in some areas of India, there's beautiful luxury and wealth and, different places that reflect a totally different India. And it's just kind of the reality that there's a very clear divide still between these haves and have-nots. And it's, growing greater. However, there is a growing population of the middle class due to a lot of the outsourcing and different things that are occurring within those industries, which I've kind of explained that process to you a little bit, and their technology. The last thing we want to note is dealing with this quota system and this that's kind of hurting people. So the last bullet is that schools and state-owned is hyphenated, schools and state-owned or government jobs use the quota system. Which limits social advancement for many. So one of the issues that they have is this quota system, or a lot of times what's referred to as reservation. That's why if you're looking at these pictures, it's saying, like the one gentleman has the sign on that says, "I was born intelligent, but reservation ruined me." The idea is that with the quota system, they reserve spots for so many people within their kind of social economic breakdown to fill those spots. So you could be very, very intelligent and, very applicable for a job or a career field. However, because of this quota system, once they have so many numbers filled of a certain spot, you might get passed over for someone who's less qualified simply because they fit into one of those brackets over you. And so it's kind of similar to like an idea of affirmative action in our country, but it's still one of those topics that's really, hot button. And in their country, it brings up a lot of issues of, the caste system in the past. So that's one of the problems, is a lot of the youth of their country, which, as we found out from some of our articles, is a good portion of their population, feel like they're being discriminated against for these jobs, and that their social mobility is limited. So that's something that they're definitely taking cause with. So just things to kind of think about as they're moving forward in their society. All right, so then the third question, we've talked about this a little bit, is India and Pakistan. And we already discussed how the idea of partitions and things like that caused some tension. But there's also some disputes that they have over territory and things like that. So for the third question, the first bullet is India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan have been fighting over the disputed, D-I-S-P-U-T-E-D, the disputed territory of Kashmir, which is up on the screen there for you, Kashmir, since their independence. Since their independence. So if you're looking at the map, Kashmir is in that northern part, the part that's orange striped, and it's one of the territories that is highly disputed because it technically falls into Pakistan. However, India has been making claim to it. So just that part of the subcontinent is kind of battling over who technically owns this territory. So very similar to, conflicts like in the Middle East that we were looking at. And because of this, territorial issues and many other things, there's been a lot of violence and things that have occurred. So the second bullet is violence and multiple wars. Violence and multiple wars between the sides have increased the tensions. Multiple wars between the sides have increased the tensions. So conflict between these two sides has really, escalated the situation and the tensions between India and Pakistan, especially over the last, 60 years or so that they've been fighting. And as a result, they've taken some economic steps. The third bullet is this has resulted in bans, B-A-N-S, in bans on products and travel between the countries. Ban on products and travel between the countries. So for a while, they banned people traveling, from India to Pakistan, from Pakistan to India, different things like that. It's kind of similar to the relationship that we, the United States, have with Cuba, where we don't allow their products to be exported to our country. We don't allow people to travel there, things like that. Similar type of relationship, even though, they're right next door, similar, to kind of us in Cuba. But moving forward, especially with the younger generation of Indians and Pakistanis, is they want to, make peace. And that's kind of where they're hoping to move forward at this time, especially because they recognize that they can benefit each other economically. So the last bullet for this question is, however, recently the two sides have been attempting to make peace. And find ways to mutually benefit their economies. Find ways to mutually benefit their economies. So they're moving forward and hopefully going to resolve this conflict that's been around for a while. That's the hope. The last thing we're going to talk about is kind of the culture of India and what's kind of unique about India. So the first thing we want to know is that India is the second most populated country. India is the second most populated country with 1.2 billion people. 1.2 billion people, semicolon. So obviously behind China, but second most populated country in the world. And with that, it's also very diverse. So it is a very diverse culture. It is a very diverse culture with 7 different religions. With 7 different religions. So there on the screen, it's showing you 6 of the 7s because they're spelling out Indian, but it shows you, all of the different religions that are practiced there and embraced, and religious tolerance is a big part of their society to a degree. However, there has been conflicts in the past between especially Muslims and Hindus and things like that. And you'll see some of that in the movie that we're going to watch. The second thing we want to note is that Hindi, 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 is the most spoken language. Hindi is the most spoken language, but there are over 3,000 different languages and dialects, DIALECTS, throughout India. So within India, they have over 3,000 different languages and dialects. Dialects is kind of like the specific type of the language that you're speaking. So like, for example, English, different dialects would be British English, American English, South African English, Indian English, so on and so forth. So within their country, they have languages that have separate dialects within that. Hindi is the most spoken, followed by Bengali, which is another big one, but they have so many different languages and components of their language that makes it very interesting there. And obviously we talked about before how English is another really important one in their society due to the colonization that they experienced. The third thing, which is kind of interesting, is that India produces the world's most watched cinema. Produces the world's most watched cinema. CINEMA. Semicolon. So that means that they produce more movies, more films than any other country in the entire world. Like I'm talking, if the United States, we put out, let's say, 3,000 movies in a year, India puts out like 10,000 movies in a year. It's insane the amount of movies that they produce. And India has gotten a nickname for their film industry, which is called Bollywood, which is what we're going to write next. So semicolon, their film industry is nicknamed Bollywood, which is up on the screen there for you. That's not a real sign. It's more or less a play on the Hollywood sign. But that's what they refer to as their industry. And the films of Bollywood are characterized a lot of times by really beautiful, bright costumes, a lot of beautiful, women and men, and big dance sequences. It kind of almost has a retro feeling to the movies of the 1940s and 1950s in the United States that kind of had like a lightness to them. I'll show you a clip from a movie which is called Bride and Prejudice, and this has some actors that maybe you recognize that are also well-known American actors that got their start in India. So I'm going to play you this clip to kind of show you what a typical Bollywood movie kind of looks like.
This is great. This is what the girls tease the boys and the boys tease the girls.
Brace yourself, Darcy. He's about to transform into the Indian MC Hammer. What are they like?
सोनिया दे रंग देख लो बिना डोर तो मैं उड़ती पतंग देख लो ओ बल्ले बल्ले जे सोनिया दे रंग देख लो बिना डोर तो मैं उड़ती पतंग देख लो आज मुझसे होए What do they sing?
Oh, these pretty girls fluttering temptingly like kites without string.
ए कुड़िया कुड़िया ए दिखिया छुरिया ए कुड़िया कुड़िया दिखिया छुरिया उड़िया जावन हटना आवन ओ एना पूंदिया दे मारे होए रंग देख लो ओ बल्ले बल्ले जे सोनिया दे रंग देख लो बिना डोर तो मैं उड़ती पतंग देख लो
सुनाओ सानू हाल सोनियो सत श्री अकाल सोनियो सुनाओ सानू हाल सोनियो ओ जरा नच के दिखाओ साडे नाल सोनियो दसो जी सवाल सोनियो एडी क्यों चाल सोनियो दसो जी सवाल सोनियो एडी क्यों चाल सोनियो
नारा 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 ए तिखियां तेज कटारा ए नारा 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 ए तिखियां तेज कटारा बिजली दिया रंगिया तारा 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 जे कोल एना दे आओगे ता प्यार
These girls are like naked live wires. If you get too close, you'll get an electric shock of love.
विच आया करो बागे विच आया करो जद चन्न छुप जावे तुसी मुखड़ा दिखाया करो
ऊपर बता तो फुआर आई हसीन पानी बितार आई तू आ गया ता बाहर आई हसीन हो गए नजारे सारे
All right, so that kind of just gives you an idea of what they look like. And Bollywood movies are hugely popular in India and get a lot of recognition throughout the really the world for their talent and their entertainment value and things like that. So if you never checked one of those out and that clip entertained you, definitely check some out on Netflix or YouTube or things like that, because they definitely are cool to see. So the last thing we're going to talk about is the sports that Indians enjoy. So The fourth bullet is Indians enjoy many different sports, but most popular is the sport of cricket. CRICKET, which is what's shown in that picture there. And cricket is very similar in some ways to baseball, but somewhat different. It's a very fast-moving game. It's very close compared to baseball. It's not so spread out. And you play with a hard kind of wooden ball. That is why the batters are wearing such, heavy protection there. Because it really can, wallop out there and hurt. So it's a very fast, kind of interesting game. And if you've never checked it out, check out a clip on YouTube, or I would also check out, there is a new movie that's coming out that talks about, I think it's called $1 Million Arm, and it talks about that idea. So that is the end of section 5. So in class, at some point then, you're going to need to take your section 5 quiz.